New reports suggest that files connected to Jeffrey Epstein may have been compromised, with the Federal Bureau of Investigation saying the documents were possibly accessed from within a foreign country. The timing of this revelation has sparked renewed debate, as critics argue that the controversy surrounding the Epstein files has repeatedly been overshadowed by other major events. Some commentators claim that Donald Trump's conflict with Iran helped shift media attention away from renewed scrutiny of Epstein-related investigations. However, the latest developments could bring the focus back to those files. The issue also goes back several years. According to statements referenced by James Comer, there were already concerns in 2019 about potential interference in investigations tied to Epstein. That earlier timeline is important, critics say, because it may help explain how the documents were handled and why questions about them have continued for so long.
Sounds pretty sick if what's been said about it's true. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm glad that the New Mexico authorities are going there and searching that property. I know that if no one searches the property, whenever this investigation is finally concluded, people are always going to have questions about whether or not there were deaths there, whether or not there were mysterious surgeries and things like that happening on the ranch. I don't know, but I do know this. The federal government asked New Mexico to stop their investigation, I believe back in 2019, of that ranch. So there's just so many questions about how the government failed the victims and how government failed in trying to prosecute Epstein sooner. I mean, this whole thing doesn't make sense. Everyone has conspiracy theories on, how Epstein was able to get away with it. Was it because he had, powerful friends?
Yeah.
Was it because he was an agent? No, we don't know, but we're going to find out, and I'm glad that they're on the ground now in New Mexico searching that property.
Congressman, you said in 2019 the government told New Mexico authorities to stand down investigating the ranch. Do you know what branch of the government?
It was the Department of Justice, I believe, and I believe it was because they I believe it perhaps was the Southern District of New York, because they had taken over the investigation at that point. So again, these are questions that we have. We want to get the answers, but I will say publicly, I'm glad that the New Mexico authorities are on the ground searching that property. I don't know if there's anything there. I don't think anybody knows, but I do know this, Jesse. It's probably never been searched before very thoroughly.
That's crazy.
The house probably has, but the property hasn't.
On Fox of all places, James Comer is confirming that when New Mexico tried to investigate the Epstein ranch with possible bodies buried with all sorts of documentation, footage, crimes, I'm sure, covering every single acre of that estate, the DOJ stepped in. Donald Trump's DOJ in 2019 and shut it all down. We continue to see more and more stories about the prison guards searching up Epstein's name who were charged with mishandling documents, not doing their jobs, and paying attention to Epstein. But somehow, those charges were dropped. An investigation into Epstein's ranch, and somehow that was dropped as well by Donald Trump's 2019 DOJ. It is not being talked about enough how long this cover-up has been going on for and how it's only getting worse. So much so that Pam Bondi is now hiding. And this story is driving me crazy, but I think the nature of it is very important in telling as it relates to this foreign hack of the files. Report: Bondi is said to move to military housing because of threats. The Attorney General relocated from a Washington apartment to a base in the area within the past month. According to people familiar with the situation, Attorney General Pam Bondi has quietly relocated to one of several military bases in the Washington area where other Trump administration officials also live after facing threats from drug cartels and critics of her actions in handling the Jeffrey Epstein case. Miss Bondi moved from an apartment in the city within the past month in response to an array of threats flagged to her staff by federal law enforcement. One catalyst was an increase in threats following the capture and prosecution of Nicolas Maduro and, of course, as well as her information about the Epstein files. Other officials who have relocated include Stephen Miller, Marco Rubio, Kristi Noem, and the Defense Secretary, of course, Pete Hegseth. So Pam Bandy gets to live on our dime because people are upset with her for not releasing the Epstein files. Does that seem fair that our taxes are being used to cover up the Epstein files and then also pay to protect the woman who's covering up the Epstein files? I'm not saying that Pam Bandy should be in harm's way. I'm certainly not saying that. I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying that I'm thrilled that she gets free housing. What these people accuse the immigrants of getting, the immigrants, they're stealing from you. They're stealing your housing. That's their whole philosophy of why the cost of housing is so high. They don't want to talk about private equity. They don't want to talk about BlackRock. No, they just want to blame immigrants. But no, it's actually Pam Bandy who's taking housing to protect herself. And that's an interesting little group, isn't it? And it's only made more interesting by this report about a hack of the Epstein files. Exclusive foreign hacker in 2023 compromised Epstein files held by FBI. Source and documents show a foreign hacker compromised files relating to the FBI's investigation of Jeffrey Epstein during a break-in at the Bureau's New York field office 3 years ago. According to a source familiar with the matter and recently published Justice Department documents reviewed by Reuters, the details of who accessed a server at the FBI's New York field office, including the allegation that a foreign hacker was involved, are being reported here for the first time. In a statement, the FBI said it described it as a cyber incident that was an isolated one. The FBI restricted access to the malicious actor and rectified the network. The investigation remains ongoing, so we do not have further comments to provide at this time. Although the source said the intrusion appeared to have been carried out by a cyber criminal rather than a foreign government. The incident underscores the file's potential intelligence value. One academic said, the legally mandated publication of U.S. Department documents has exposed the dead financiers tied to prominent people in politics, finance, academia, and business, triggering investigators in numerous countries around the world. Who wouldn't be going after the Epstein files if you're the Russians or somebody else? Said John Lindsay, who researches the role of emerging technology and global security at the Georgia Institute of Technology. If foreign intelligence agencies are not thinking seriously about the Epstein files as a target, then I would be shocked. The breach was reportedly contemporaneously by CNN and Reuters on February 17th. The correction to Epstein materials was made by the French magazine Marianne. The hack occurred after a server at the Child Exploitation Forensics Lab at the FBI's New York field office was inadvertently left vulnerable by a special agent, Aaron Spivak, who was trying to navigate the Bureau's complex procedures for handling digital evidence. According to the source and the documents, in his statement to FBI investigators examining whether he was responsible for the breach, Spivak said that he was being made a scapegoat for the intrusion and that conflicting Bureau policies and faulty guidance around information technology were to blame. Reuters could not establish the result of the Bureau's internal investigation. The person familiar with the breach said that the intrusion was carried out by a foreign hacker who did not appear to realize they had penetrated a law enforcement server. The hacker expressed disgust at the presence of child abuse images on the device and left a message threatening to turn its owner over. To the FBI, the person said. According to new reports, data connected to the Jeffrey Epstein case, including photos and records related to abuse investigations, may have been hacked by someone possibly linked to a foreign government. The Federal Bureau of Investigation says the files could have been compromised, meaning they might have been accessed, altered, or even deleted. Some analysts, including academic John Lindsay, initially pointed to Russia as a possible source because of past speculation about Russia's connections to the Epstein case. But critics argue that other actors could also have motives to interfere with those files. For example, some commentators suggest that Israel might have an interest in preventing certain information from becoming public, citing past allegations about Epstein's links to Mossad and relationships with former Israeli officials. Lawmakers like Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie have called for deeper investigations into the Epstein files. Critics also question why discussions connecting these issues to Donald Trump or his conflict with Iran are often dismissed in mainstream outlets like The Washington Post. They argue these possibilities should at least be examined openly as part of understanding the full Epstein story. The Washington Post writes, "The conflict has also sparked a sharp rise in an anti-Semitic content, according to researchers from the Anti-Defamation League, a Jewish civil rights organization. Some of it seeking to link Epstein, who is Jewish, to the conflict." Pretty quickly after the conflict began, this conspiratorial rebranding of Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. military's official name, into Operation Epstein Fury, started circulating on social media platforms. The ADL's senior vice president of counter-extremism and intelligence said an ADL report found the phrase Epstein Fury was mentioned more than 90,000 times. Some commentators say the phrase Operation Epstein Fury reflects their belief that Donald Trump is trying to shift attention away from the controversy surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein files. They argue that calling this criticism anti-Semitic misses the point because the discussion is about political accountability, not religion. Critics have also pushed back at responses from groups like the Anti-Defamation League, saying the debate should not be dismissed but discussed openly. That's something we'll keep talking about on this show. If you want to support it, subscribe, leave a like, and drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I will see you soon.